I could call the study session to order. The roll call, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Bear? Present. Commissioner Walls? Commissioner Kennedy?
Present.
Commissioner Duckham? Here. Commissioner Tompkins? Commissioner Mahoney? Present. Commissioner Williams? Present. Commissioner Elwell? Here. Chairman Shotwell?
Here.
7 present.
Thank you. Before we start public comment, I would like everyone to keep Rodney Walls and his family in your mind and thoughts. If you were at the strategic session yesterday, Mike had shared some concerns about Rodney's wife, and we'll just continue those on to today, please. Thank you. Public comment. Each individual will state their name, speak for 3 minutes to address the board only. And under this public comment opportunity, there'll be an additional one at the end of the meeting. You may not yield. Members will not debate nor answer questions at this time. First public comment. Public comment. Public comment is now closed. Move to approval of the April 2nd study session 2019. We have a motion and support. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Duly carried. Mr. Overton, your meeting.
All right, thank you. At this time, if Amy would come forward, we're going to get, I believe it was last meeting or last month, we had conversation in regard to the brownfield. And lo and behold, there are definitely things we can all learn from more about brownfield. And I think it's appropriate, and Amy's going to be here, and Dave, and I think Shotwell has something he needs right now, right, Chairman?
Yeah, I'd like to entertain a motion to receive the benefits of Jackson County Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, a memo from Dave Snegic and Envirologic. So moved. Have a motion and support. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, duly carried.
Without further ado, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. As staff of the JCBRA, working with the administrator, we thought that perhaps kind of a Brownfield 101 might be a good idea to explain how tax increment financing works, the Brownfield process, and answer some questions along those lines. So with that, our consultant, Dave Snegic with Envirologic, who is the consultant for the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, is going to speak to you on some general terms. In Holden Branch with the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, Eagle, should be here shortly to follow up with some handouts and some further information. So with that, I'll introduce Dave Snegic. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm hoping my tag team partner is going to show up here quickly because we were going to be brief and entertain questions, but I can fill in for him if needed. So I was going to just start with some of the basics. What is a Brownfield Authority and the purpose of it, and then talk what Brownfield Authorities can do, and then specifically we were going to talk about tax increment financing through a brownfield plan. So what is a Brownfield Redevelopment Authority? This is an authority that was fully commissioned by an act with a purpose of really addressing urban sites that are blighted, functionally obsolete, contaminated, have been left behind. The term comes from, it's real easy to grow out at the perimeters of your urban core, where you can purchase an old cornfield, plow it under, put up a building, a green field. And the antithesis of that would be something made of concrete, fully developed, maybe vacated, maybe contaminated, a brownfield. And in the 90s, we were experiencing urban sprawl at quite a pace, and our urban cores were being abandoned. Brownfield redevelopment authorities were established to help bring redevelopment back to those urban areas. Brownfield redevelopment authorities can only work on certain types of properties that are eligible properties, and those are those sites that are contaminated, sites that are blighted, which we can define for you if you're interested, but what you picture is blighted, or functionally obsolete, buildings that just cannot be used for modern purposes anymore. And then lastly, two, properties that are owned by the Land Bank Authority. These are all brownfield sites that a Brownfield Redevelopment Authority can help. Well, how can they help? First of all, one of the things authorities can do is receive grants from federal and state governments. And we've given you a little nugget of information here in Jackson County between the city's Brownfield Redevelopment Authority and the county's Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. We have received over $5.5 million of federal funds to support brownfield redevelopment in the county, which is a significant amount. We're a very active brownfield redevelopment authority in that realm. And those funds have been used primarily for assessment of sites, but also the cleanup of several sites as well. They've spurred over $100 million in private investment, created new jobs, preserved additional jobs. So those grants have been very, very significant. In addition, we've received grants from the state of Michigan, the most notable one being a loan that was accepted to help in the airport realignment work. So, you know, we had to essentially move a landfill to help that realignment project happen, and a DEQ loan was an important part of that. The other ways that we can help is through something called tax increment financing, and I may cover for my tag team partner here pretty shortly, which is a way of local support for projects, as well as garnering additional state support through the capture of the state education tax and school operating tax if the state supports that project. Through that tax increment financing, we can help municipalities or developers overcome some of the challenges with these properties. If you have in your mind a picture of some old contaminated factory that's been abandoned, and you can picture yourself as the developer wanting to go in there and do something new and exciting with that project, you can understand there's challenges that you have to overcome immediately before you can begin to build. You may have to do some demolition. There may be asbestos in that building. I'm sorry? Yes, sir.
I sat on the Land Bank Authority, and you speak that property they own is eligible for brownfield redevelopment.
Yes, sir.
The bulk of our property is residential. Are residential units available for this stuff? I wouldn't think so.
Through the Land Bank Authority, they are. You can, yes, the Land Bank Authority can do kind of a fairly unique brownfield plan on that collection of residential properties if they so choose, in order to collect the tax increment that might eventually happen from the sale of those and the redevelopment of those.
Okay.
You also have your 5-year 50% collection period, which is how you probably fund most of your operational work, though, right?
Is that more where the land bank collects and groups parcels of land as opposed to individual houses per se, or?
Typically, the way a land bank authority would do a brownfield plan is as a collection of properties, and do that.
So in a sense that the land bank owns a whole lot of houses, we wouldn't do individual land bank for each little house. It's I think the city, the city has said more than once that, they're assembling properties and looking for tracts of land where they can redevelop something.
Right, do land assembly.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You bet. Yeah, land banks are its own unique beast. So, through tax increment financing, the things that we can pay for as a brownfield redevelopment authority help developers, those demolition activities, asbestos abatement, and then any environmental activities. Now, it's important to understand too that in general terms, we are helping only the non-liable parties. We are not helping the polluter that had a release, that didn't manage their property appropriately, deal with their environmental obligations. These are ways to help new non-liable parties come into a contaminated property, address those concerns, make the property safe, make it developable, and use tax increment financing, grants, loans to help address those costs. And he's here. Hey, and right on time.
Dave, just real quick before you walk away, I'd like to address a couple of projects that have been very timely with your company helping us. Number one, the old Woolworth building, which is now an innovation center for consumers' energy and is being utilized. You came through and helped us with that property, and most people wouldn't think that you'd have something that was a retail establishment, commercial property, Center City, have, the need for a brownfield analysis. And could you cover that and what we took care of down there to make that building functional now?
Mr. Chairman, I move to receive these documents.
We have a motion and support. All in favor? Opposed? Duly carried.
So the Woolworth building in particular, I mean, it was functionally obsolete. It was not usable. The major issue there being asbestos that had to be removed, and I think our EPA assessment grant from several grants ago was used to do all the assessment work for that, help put together a cleanup budget for that, so that it could go into somebody's pro forma and be utilized again. So,
That's something city center that everybody sees that you wouldn't really think of as an issue. I mean, it was a candy store. It was a Five and Dime. It was the lunch counter. It was, the famous French fries, everything like that goes on in a Woolworths, but it had to be taken care of. It had to be cleaned up, and either that or encapsulated and properly protected and maintained. And these are the different things that we deal with in buildings that were at one time thought to be wonderful buildings and be clean, and we ended up saving the facade and also the property for use. It would have been very difficult to try to insert a building between two buildings, but it's easier to redevelop a piece of property when you don't have to take it down. And it was a very sound structure. I mean, it could have been a parking garage. So,
well, I'm going to turn it over to Holden with the Eagle, and then we're available for questions.
Good morning. All right. Does everybody have the documents in front of them? And I also have extras if anybody out here would. First off, I would like to apologize for being late.
step up to the microphone so we can record this. Thank you.
So I'd like to apologize for running a little behind. Murphy's Law took over this morning. And so I didn't get to catch all what he went over, but based off discussions, I think a lot of what he went over will be on the first sheet, the tax increment, just the fact sheet, eligible activities, what we can cover, and the approval process. Did you guys have any questions or do you want to wait till the end?
We'll take a minute to go.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good. So who can use TIF? BRA developer. And I kind of want to go over the basics of what TIF is, which is, I grabbed it all. So this diagram is kind of the best way to describe this. So we have the developer costs. So in the diagram it's $10 that's the taxable value on the property. Once the developer puts their money in, it raises up to $110, it shows. That difference of $100 is what is captured through TIF. So that $10 continues to be paid towards the taxes, so the county, the city, whoever, the tax authority, remains, everything stays the same, the whole, and that difference is captured to pay off the developer, any grantor loan, or any loans that have been attained to develop the property. And then as the brownfield plan expires, that difference then goes to the county. So, like I have a Washtenaw, for example, I have a Washtenaw County project that the developer will be paid off in 9 years. And then they have a 5-year span where the BRA can collect that tax increment, and they can put that into a LBRF, which is, I believe we're utilizing that in the Dollar General redevelopment that we just recently approved. So they can capture that tax increment for 5 years, and then that jump of however much it makes in the tax increment goes back to the tax base for the county. Any questions on that, on how that works? We have dollar bills, but of course those are at the office, and I didn't take those when I was changing a flat tire this morning, so. What to use and when paper, that is kind of just a general overview of kind of what MEDC and MSF can fund through theirs, which is the infrastructure, non-environmental tasks, and then what, this is in old form as you see it says MDEQ, but what Eagle can cover is the environmental tasks that developers will run into, and then the grant and loan portion as well that would be related to me at Eagle. A lot of this is going to be under the eligible activity, so I don't want to beat a dead horse by going over it one by one. Do you guys have any questions on tax increment financing?
How does it work when there's overlap? So there's a DDA or, also, and now you got a brownfield involved.
So I haven't ran into that personally. I'm relatively new, but the way I understand it is a lot of times the county will say, we're going to allow, is that right?
We do both ways.
Yeah.
So, you want me?
Yeah, I haven't ran into any of that, so.
So this happens often when we're working in an urban city. So there's two ways to handle it. So first of all, DDAs, TIFAs, LDFAs, all these acronyms of different tax increment financing authorities. They don't necessarily capture all the taxes. So there are some where the DDA can continue to capture its share of the tax increment. And then through a brownfield authority, you can capture the additional taxing jurisdictions that are not captured by the DDA. Those generally being the school taxes and the intermediate school district taxes. The other way to do it is something called an interlocal agreement, where that's what I think you were going with, is that you ask the DDA to step aside on this specific property for a period of time. Problem with interlocal agreements sometimes is if a DDA is bonded and they need all that tax increment, those layerings can be a little bit difficult.
When you talk about the school taxes, for instance, being captured, those are made whole by the state typically or not?
Yeah.
And are they always made whole?
So the way the school taxes work, so the school captures, it goes into the state education fund, and that is a school-by-school basis. So every pupil in a school has a dollar amount set to them. So a community that doesn't have any redevelopments that does tax increment financing or Act 381 work plans, they aren't punished by not getting that difference in taxes. So a student in Northville will still get the same dollar rate as a student in Onstead, Michigan. So, and that change, so say you're paying $100 in school taxes before the redevelopment and after it's $1,000. That $100 continues to go into that state fund. And then once the development's done, then the whole state can benefit from that jump to $1,000.
But What about local, for instance, millage proposals? Local school, you're talking about the state aid formula, I think, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you have a school district that has a millage, that is captured as well, correct?
Correct.
And is that made whole by the state to the local district or not?
Yeah. The treasury, that would go through the treasury, correct, yeah.
Thank you.
To be clear, though, when you say that is captured, the millage, they're not capturing the school's millage. It's the incremental increase. If
You're
you have
right.
a half
Yes,
a mil,
correct.
the school's going to continue to get its half a mil.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say it captured the
Yep.
initial part, but the
Yeah.
increase it captures.
Is it any incremental
Yeah,
increase?
the difference is what what's
It
captured.
gets convoluted.
Yes, it does.
Oh, okay, so while we're on it, I guess, and now that I think about it, what about, for instance, police and fire millages in the same areas? Would the same thing hold true with that?
That
it's
would be the
made-
local, yep, the local.
And those are made whole by the state as well?
I believe through, fire marshal or Laura.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about local millages that are enacted to support, well, for instance, Blackman Township has a millage.
So it'd still be that increment, just the change that would affect that.
So anything that was captured, though, incrementally above, are they made whole on that, or you don't know?
They are not. That's a local millage, so that's local support for the project.
Okay,
And that's until the brownfield's done,
Correct.
correct?
And by statute, that's a good point. So
Yep.
by statute, the plan can be a maximum of 30 years. And typically, we try not to go that long. So you are definitely pledging the increment, the dollars that you don't get yet, you're deferring your benefit from that project to help the project go. And that's what a brownfield plan does for you.
And the same thing works with DDAs and LDFAs also.
Absolutely, same thing.
Or the program that we're working with Brooklyn on right now,
Correct.
the corridor improvement.
Corridor improvement.
Yep.
What if our economy starts booming similar to right now? Is there a limit to how much of this the state can handle? I mean, where do they come up with the money to make everybody's taxes whole and stuff like that?
Comes out of the general fund.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's appropriated out of the general fund, Phil.
So it's important to understand that annually, our Brownfield Authority and every other Brownfield Authority has to report to the state the dollars that are taken from this, that, and the other taxing jurisdiction. So the state has a continuous knowledge of what's happening out there with the tax capture process. Before the tax increment financing is authorized, you have to adopt a brownfield plan. You have adopted no less than 7 or 8 of those by now. And that plan, if it intends to capture the school operating or SET, we also have to notify the state, so they're aware in advance of that tax increment being collected that, okay, here's one more. So there's a monitoring of
Is there
that
a limit
process.
to what the state can handle? I mean, in theory, development could unbalance the state budget. Or, I mean,
That
I'm
would
missing
be astronomical development first, and second, they'd be getting sales tax and income tax from all of those employees, and they would be getting the additional property taxes from surrounding development and everything that would go with it that's non-eligible.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, the question's not really for either of us to answer, to be honest with you, but I would say this as a point, and I'll let you talk too then. The state is ramping up what a brownfield plan can do, what a brownfield authority can do. The message I would leave with you today is, this is not just an environmental program, it's an economic development program. And they're empowering it with even more things that you've probably heard about, transformational brownfield plans and transit-oriented operations that can be funded through a brownfield plan. It is become the most economically, or the most powerful economic development tool in the box right now. And so I think if the legislature says, go, 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 do more, do more, do more, they do not fear the ability to back fund the obligations of the state.
Yep, hit the nail on the head. I was just gonna add that the general fund that makes those holes, that is made up of so many dollars. Like, any unreturned pop can, that 10 cents goes into the general fund. Like, so there's a lot of it, so I always tell my wife, throw your pop cans away, don't return them.
Well, be careful, we've got to recycle something.
Well, right, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, good morning. You didn't, the other gentleman spoke earlier about, these aren't projects that would be eligible to, the way I took it, the original owner. It wouldn't, getting rid of the contamination or the blight. I got a specific question, because I think you would be familiar with the property, the Clark Equipment Building out in Michigan Center. Would that be an eligible site, or would it not be, since it's not a new owner or developer?
Well, I'll hesitate to speak any specifics because I don't know anything about who owns what and
Okay.
how they came into ownership. In general terms, what we're helping is parties that are purchasing these properties. It's usually the assistance comes at the time of the acquisition and build out.
My question, thank you.
Okay,
Yep.
good.
On current dilapidated property or blighted property, Corey, similar to the one you're describing, there has been, the property has changed hands a number of times since the original owner that may have caused the environmental concern. That current property owner would need to talk to the EPA about getting it on the Superfund list, and I believe it's in our list, isn't it, Amy? The Clark site. Is it in our inventory?
I'm
Yeah, yeah. So it's already designated, and we're aware of it, so that way if it does change hands, we can help a new developer to clean it up. But also, the current developer would have to, again, like I said, talk to the EPA about moving it in that direction, which is different than a brownfield because it's a current owner versus a new owner.
But if someone were to purchase it, that would change it.
Yes,
Okay.
I wouldn't.
and it would depend on what they're purchasing it for.
And I wouldn't ignore the current owner. If they're not a liable party and they've been sitting on it for a while and now they want to do something more grand, they should come to the enterprise group and engage in that conversation. I didn't mean to imply that only new prospective purchasers can be assisted. That's just generally where that interest in a property comes from.
Okay. Thank you.
Would the same situation apply to the Kelsey Hayes property?
Yes, that is, so that's my lifetime goal, to see something happen on that property. I can't retire till that happens. The problem with that property is we have an absent owner.
No.
And they're not responsive to local developers and local officials who wish to see something happen differently there. But yes, as the prime site for...
Aren't they also the responsible party?
It's been sold a number of times.
Oh, has it?
There's a lot of entities involved in that. As part of our work, we obtained a memo regarding all the different entities that have taken ownership over the years, merged, separated. It's a clutter of something that some attorney will need to figure out someday.
Plethora.
Good morning. Your sheet here on this tax increment financing. I guess previously to me and to a lot of people I know, the tax increment financing has the connotation that even though the value of the land has gone up, the taxes on that increased value are not being collected. So people have asked me, well, does that mean that then the schools aren't getting the tax from the current value of the land? Is this what you're telling me, is that, in your example, if the taxes were originally $10, after the property improvement, the amount of tax that should be paid are $110. But to assist the owner for their investment in this, you're going to let the owner continue to pay the $10 tax rate, but the state picks up the difference so that the $110 total will be paid, so the school district gets all they should.
No,
Is that
so,
correct?
so that capture, that $100 difference?
What do you mean capture? I mean, I don't chase money around and grab it. I don't know what
So it's the $10 is the initial, the tax base,
Okay,
the initial SEV, and then after the development, it's $110. So that $100 difference there is captured by the county to put back to the developer to pay off his loans and anything, to reimburse him for his investment.
captured by the county from whom?
Him.
From him.
The taxpayer's still paying the money
Yep.
in.
He's still paying everything the same, that $110, but he's only $10 is staying within the county. The rest $100 is coming back to him to reimburse him for his investment within the community.
So it's, Tony, it's captured locally and given back to him to reimburse him for the investment in the property. So the taxes are being paid by him of $110 in the example. The 10 is what was paid before the development, and that still goes to those entities, but the extra $100 is captured by the county and then given back to him to reimburse him for the development.
Correct.
Is that
And
accurate?
then, after the Act 381 work plan is done, so up to 30 years, then the county will see that $110. And nothing goes back to the developer after that. Or you
Okay,
can
so
make
during
it so
that-
after 10 years, that's as much as the developer gets.
During that 10-year, 30-year designated time
Yep.
period.
Yep.
The county schools, the county fire and police millages are not receiving the increased tax value.
Correct. That is captured.
Captured, explain that to me, I don't understand that.
So
Your turn.
he's paying the $100 so it's $10, that up to 110 is the new. That $100 difference is captured. So it's not going into the county to be put towards.
Captured by whom and
So
kept
the
where?
county treasurer collects the taxes from you for your property. She gives $10 to the county general for us to spend, and in the form of a tax credit, returns the $100 to you, the developer, to pay for what are considered brownfield eligible items. Putting a pumping station in, putting air purifier systems in, capping a parking lot? Is that, it depends, yeah.
Yeah, it can.
You don't want digging up the dirt, putting the dirt like we did at the airport, and transporting it to a proper facility so that way it's not leaching into somebody else's soil and causing problems.
If I can interject, Tony, captures may be a bad word. It's collected just like regular taxes, but it's a way for the government to make sure that that money, that $100, is spent only on eligible items, correct?
Correct.
So it is collected, it's tax that's collected, but again, it's returned to the developer if he has eligible activity there.
Okay,
I have a question, but
thank you.
eligible activity, or is it for the whole factory they just put in?
Eligible activities.
Eligible
Yep.
activity.
So
So it's remediation type activity?
yes, so when they submit a Act 381 work plan, we look at, all right, does this fall under what we consider eligible activities, which would be, contaminated soil, which I think you went over a lot of those. And a lot of them are also on the spreadsheet one I gave that'll say whether or not it's eligible under Act 381.
So is the capture on the whole project or just the eligible activities?
Just the eligible activities.
Okay. Because I can see I was thinking the capture was on the whole project, and then once the eligible activities have been reimbursed.
It can be the whole project, depending on if they go through MEDC for MSF funds as well.
Oh, and the
So,
plot
yes, yes. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, so Eagle, formerly DEQ, we would cover the environmental tasks. So any environmental eligible activities, we would do the tax increment financing for. And then MEDC would do things like a parking lot, parking structure, infrastructure, new utilities, stuff like that.
And this gentleman is why we have experts at the EG who literally hold the hand of business owners to help them get through the maze of opportunities. And the reason that that's a good thing for us is properties would sit idle for forever. I mean, why, when you can build on a greenfield for zero risk, so to speak, versus a brownfield site, you're going to go to the greenfield. Sir.
Great.
So it's done. Once the developer's paid off completely, but the county can put towards their local brownfield revolving fund, the LBRF, they can capture up to 5 years as well. I mean, that's just kind of a separate. It has to be included in the plan. So. Yep, the only issue there would be the dollar amount, because it's always associated with a dollar amount in the brownfield plan, and you just can't go over that, because that would be the allotted that's been approved. Yep.
Also understand that when we plan these out, we don't look to have surplus. You'd have to have
Right.
real appreciation in the property after the development had been made for us to get there.
And that's also why it's captured by the county and brought in so it can be monitored and you know that it's eligible activities and where the money's going, so it's accountable.
In addition, I would just add, just for, when people ask you, oh, there we go again, subsidizing some, rich business owner, this or that, you can explain that if they build on a greenfield site, it's still going to cost government monies, because when they build out in a greenfield site, generally speaking, there's not infrastructure there. So suddenly, who's paying for those water lines, sewer lines, all-season road, D-cell, XL lanes, all that stuff? Government pays for that, and it just continues to eat up, if you will, farm property, when we'd be better off redeveloping in the urban area where you already have the infrastructure. The road might need improved, but it's already there. The water lines, sewer lines, you name it, it's all there.
Yep. Preventing
So,
that urban sprawl.
It's good to remember that, though, because people always say, well, there you go, helping out the fat cat. Well, wait a minute. If we didn't do this, that property would sit idle forever, well, potentially, and be a blight, and we'd never gain anything. And at the same time, they're going to go out to the greenfield site and create more urban sprawl. It really is a good program, and it makes sense, and it's very defendable or defensible when you speak to others about it. They just need to understand, because they all think we're just giving away the farm, and we're not. We're protecting the farm, actually, by using a brownfield. Right.
One last question. We'll just use the example of the $10 value to 110 and then the hundreds captured. And we said that the developer actually does pay that tax up front. Roughly speaking, how long till they're reimbursed?
Just depends on the project.
On the project.
Yep, so with the Act 381, you're allowed up to 30 years for reimbursement. So if it's going to take 40 years for him to get paid off, SOL. He's got 30 years to get, and he can capture as much as he can in those 30 years until he is paid off.
Maybe my question is better directed to the county. my question is, so he pays his tax for 2019. When is he reimbursed for that payment?
Oh,
Right after that? Could be the day after.
wait 30 years.
Okay. Well, that's my question. Is it 30 days? Is it?
Well, we'd have to.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's.
Dave will answer that.
Sure, I can
Go ahead, Dave.
help you
Thank
out.
you.
So these are really good questions, how the cash flows, and it is why we have staff for Brownfield Redevelopment Authority to manage all this stuff. We actually send notices to the municipalities in June and December every year, right as the taxes are being collected, to remind them taxes on that parcel or parcels is not to go to the county treasurer, it's to come to the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. So those taxes are actually captured by the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. We disperse them after having reviewed developer costs to verify they're legitimate, to verify subcontractors were paid, and then we've got this long spreadsheet of annual taxes that we are collecting and then dispersing back. There's a cost to the county for doing that work. We're reimbursing ourselves as we go along so that we can continuously fund our work. And then the point being that, yes, that developer gets 2 payments a year as quickly as we get the money.
Well, that leads me, so I'm assuming you get an annual audit then, if you're actually handling funds?
We're part of the county's audit.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I wanted to.
Top of, we've been audited by the federal government a couple of different
And
times.
that too, right.
Yeah. And have been found clean.
Wanted to be.
I know, because, well, the question arises, Corey. It's always good to
Sure.
have the answer.
I wanted to be clear, though. It's not like the Brownfield has their own checking account. You're running through the treasurer's checking account, right, guys?
No.
You got a separate checking account?
We're an authority. Just
Oh, it's an
like the
authority?
medical care
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're writing checks?
and- Correct.
Right.
And have our own controls.
Okay, good.
All right, so then, during the time that the property has increased in value, because the investor has put money into it, the real taxable value of that property, with its increased value, doesn't go into the normal tax base. You, the Brownfield Development Authority, you capture it. You tell them to send their tax payment to you
No.
instead of the treasurer.
No, send it to treasurer.
And you use that money as you see fit. So,
No, not
understand that we
not
give-
true, Tony. Not
Pardon
true.
me?
Not true. It goes to the treasurer. It does not come to us first. Collected by her and passed through to us. That's how we capture it.
Well, we capture it, you as a private entity pay your tax bill to whatever taxing jurisdiction it is. Village, city, county, township, whatever. Before the township, village, city brings those funds to the county treasurer to then disperse to all the taxing jurisdictions, that's where we intercept the money. So it doesn't quite reach the county treasurer.
okay, so ultimately, the taxes from that increased value on the property, that if it was a greenfield development or just a normal development, those taxes would go, part of it would go to the school system.
Mhm.
So because we see a long-term benefit of this land not remaining vacant, not remaining polluted, but fixing it up, we're just choosing to, as an incentive to have people do that. We're just choosing to say, okay, for the next whatever time increment, you said it's up to 30 years, those increased tax dollars don't go to the school district, don't go to the fire department or police department, but they go to pay for the, so there is a time period where the taxes to the schools are not where they should be, but we're accepting that because we're seeing a long-term benefit in the property development.
You're correct. The only thing I'd add to that is the schools are back funded by the state. They are made whole at that, whatever the dollar per pupil funding requirement is.
get their millage. They don't capture their, if they have a 2.5 whatever mills, they don't suddenly go away. They get their base still. It's the increment they lose, right?
Well, that's what he's asking.
I think that's what he's asking. So like, specific to school taxes, let's just look at the school operating, 18 mil school operating taxes. Yes, you're correct. That 18, the dollars on the new development, on the 18 mills generates, are gonna come to the Brownfield Authority, reimburse us, reimburse developers. So yes, that money did not go into the coffers of the school operating budget. If, however, for any reason, the amount of money collected was insufficient to cover the requirements of so many dollars per pupil, I forget what it is, 6,600? It's probably jumped up. The state will guarantee and back fund that, so that no school district is ever going to not have the minimum amount of state support guaranteed just because they're doing brownfield redevelopment. But you're correct. We are deferring the new additional tax revenues generated by the development. They are not going to any of the taxing jurisdictions. They are going to the county to use, to reimburse the county and developers, municipalities, whoever, for dealing with these challenging properties.
All right, I just need to know how to explain to some people when they ask me, well, brownfield development means our school's getting cheated on the dollars. I mean, people ask me that question.
They do.
I need
That's right.
I need to have enough knowledge so I can explain to them accurately that that's not happening. You say it's not happening, and you
I can
say
tell
the
you it's
state
not-
is,
it's
the
not
state is
happening.
making up the difference.
Right.
Okay.
Reason I say it's not happening is because there would be no development, there'd be no dollars. So without the incentive, the developer wouldn't touch the project, and therefore there'd be zero they would be eligible for and receive. So no one's lost anything, really, because they never had it to lose, is the argument. You understand?
They do. Yes.
The voters passed. Does the school still get that extra? That's over the 18
Is that
mil
a,
student
is that a
reimbursement.
debt millage? Is that a bonded debt?
Uh-huh.
Good, great question. So we cannot capture debt millages of any type, nor can we capture special assessments
On the increase or the base?
on the increase or the base. We're not authorized to touch those.
To go back to Dave's question on police and fire, Amy visits the local jurisdictions and asks for resolutions of support from those local jurisdictions to understand what the brownfield capture is. So Dave, when we do police and fire, the local jurisdiction has the right to vote through their township boards or villages to decide whether or not they choose to give up their millage that way. And if they choose not to, then obviously, I would venture to bet the project wouldn't go forward, because that means it does not have local support.
I kind of knew the answer to the question when I asked it, but nobody was asking questions, so I asked it.
Well, you got questions now.
I just want to say also, so that you put this in perspective, Dave mentioned how many EPA grants both the city and the county have administered over time. That is a great resource for our county, because we've done a lot of development and projects with that. That money can be scarce. It's a very competitive process. We've applied for an EPA grant that helps us with assessing the environmental contamination of sites for development and protecting liability for new purchasers. But if we don't get those grants, I know that Steve, on our Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, is always worried about sustainability of this funding so that this county can continue to have development on these sites that we're talking about, on the brownfield sites. So the 5-year funding that Holden mentioned that we can collect the tax capture at the end of the brownfield plan is one of those ways to make brownfield redevelopment sustainable for Jackson County if, in fact, we don't get any more EPA grants. Because when we get an applicant on a site, if we don't have a funding source, then we may not be able to assist it, it may not be developed.
Well, I can think back to the development on South Street where we worked with the condo project on the old Dunnigan Brothers site, where we worked on the gasoline station on South Street, right along the river, that we were able to use brownfield monies and everything to help him get started and developed, and he's now at 8 employees and going quite strong, and it's a small business that we needed to step up and help and move forward with. There are many, many small sites that we have made possible and successful. I look out on East Michigan Avenue every time I drive to Parma, past the factory there. I can't think of the name of it right now.
The storage on West Michigan Avenue?
I got that one, but I mean further out where we help the environmental company that does the pipe testing and the sale of that building.
Annex.
There you go. Janex, which is a national firm that's very involved in all the redevelopment of roads and everything in the state of Michigan, or it be other sites that we've really worked hard with the private sector to turn them around, and these would be sitting vacant and they would be unused and they would be blighted, whether they be rural or urban. These are problems that we need to work on to continue to redevelop. So we're not greenfielding. So we're not taking land that was something and having a difficult time with it.
And quite often, if you look at brownfield plan as a financing tool, sometimes on a really large project, it's just one piece of many other financing tools and methods to put an entire project together. Any other questions for us?
Anyone else?
We're always available. If you have a question or a constituent asks a question that you can't respond to, feel free to contact us. We're your Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. We have a lot of resources, so we want to help you be able to explain these complex programs.
Well, I have another question, but I'm afraid to go too deep in the weeds on this, but when we have, like we had animal shelter millage, when we have a voter requested, or we're requesting voters to consider a millage, and we have to list on there all these DDAs, LDFAs, brownfields, that they're going to capture some of that tax. To me, I understand, I've been told by more than one attorney, yes, you need, they're going to capture it, you should put it on there. But at the same time, I'm always thinking that the capture is based on the value of the property, not the increase in revenue, because we're not changing the value of the property by asking for this, we're changing the revenue stream. Why is it they get a capture? Anybody?
Well, first, Mike, you got to separate DDAs and LDFAs from brownfields, because our brownfield capture is locked on the appreciation of the value greater. So your $10 for your animal millage is going to become $10.10 because it's a base millage. And then on the incremental financing that you're doing on the brownfield, you're going to capture the additional monies over the base formula. And that's the way the attorney for the, let's say, good, I'm getting nodding yes from you two. That's the way it was explained to me, and it was a long algebraic formula to actually get to that number, but it's only on the increase, and it's inside the boundary. That's one thing that is missed also. It's inside, it's not, while the millage is levied countywide, it's not completely, it's only within the boundaries of those DDAs and LDFAs, and within where we've drawn the line on the ground to make the BRA eligible. Because I know with one right now, we didn't get the correct lines drawn on the ground, and it's costing some tax credits. So, but going forward, it's working out pretty well overall. I think the projects have been excellent.
If I could also just mention, there were a lot of questions on how the tax increment is collected and how it goes through that process. In each of the municipalities use BS&A software, which is how they do their assessing and their property inspections and all of that. And so when we first do a brownfield plan, we do a letter from the Brownfield Authority after we've already had a resolution, a consent resolution from that township. We work with the supervisor, the treasurer, the assessor. Oftentimes when we get a new brownfield plan, which we probably will be doing this in Spring Arbor Township, because we approved to do a brownfield plan for a new credit union out there. We sit down and meet with them, explain the whole process, and we send them a letter that says, for these parcel ID numbers, you need to check on your BS&A software that this is a brownfield tax increment, and it tells how many years it's going to be captured. And so when they run their report of their tax revenues, that's how they identify, in very simple terms here, that's how they identify how much of it is captured tax through that Brownfield Authority. We monitor that, we report all that to the state, as they said, so, and it's audited through the county's audit. So I don't know if that helps explain that at all. Maybe it made it more complicated, I don't know.
Yeah. Any more questions? I can tell you from my perspective, I've heard this before, and I'll need to hear it again somewhere down the road, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Because I'm sitting here thinking, I'm going to have to talk to Steve offline because I still didn't understand what he was saying. But that's why we have some people who are experts in it, so that's good. That's good. If there's no other questions, we can move on, and we'll know who to call if we need help.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Business cards if anybody would like one.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to introduce the secretary from the BRA, Mark Schottmeyer. So he's here participating as a volunteer, and the reason why I do that is that we have a diverse group, whether it be retired professionals or active professionals with Consumers Energy or attorneys that assist us on the brownfield, and they bring their wisdom and help to us a lot. Mark taught at JC and has been a real asset to Jackson for the last 35 years, as I can attest. Thank you, Mark.
Let's see. Next up, we have property purchase. Everyone can turn to 6A. And if you take a look at the two attachments there, they show the very first one is it's actually three different parcels of property that are currently owned by the EG. And the red line outlines those little parcels in three different pictures. The first one being the largest is a little over 5 acres. Then there's a rectangular piece above that that borders North Street. And then the last picture is to the west side, which includes the two buildings that are over there within the walls. One being, I believe, like a service garage, and the other being where the inmates took meals. And the second attachment there is the overall. It gives you the picture with a red line showing all three properties, and you can see how the line skirts around that building there. It's the county's belief that these properties would add value to what we do day in, day out for our residents. We intend to use the building with the white roof for a lot of park equipment and maintenance and repairs and things of that sort. The other building at this time needs a considerable amount of work. It's going to have to sit for a bit. We'll do what we can to obviously make it safe and keep further deterioration. I know it has a hole in the roof, perhaps more than one. And the other thing too I would note is the wall that is on three sides here of this property is within the property limits. The county will own the wall. We did have a survey of that wall, both with engineer and I know they used a drone too to take closer looks at the top and such like that. Wall, they believe, is in very good shape. Does need some tuck pointing from time to time, they said, and of course the cap itself needs to be maintained because we don't want water infiltration through the top. that would create major problems. But they believe the wall is in no danger of imminent failure or anything like that. It was built to last, and therefore, and it has. The price on these three properties combined is $175,000. We believe that is a very fair and equitable price. And our intended use, one is, I would say, I value the restoration or the conservation part of it. If not us, who, in regard to this historic structure and wall, I believe that history is important and we should maintain it. And of course, being next to the fairgrounds, we believe there's an opportunity there when we do have large events, concerts, things of that sort, that folks can park over here and walk across North Street. There's a nice bridge across the tracks and the river, and walk right in the north entrance as far as overflow parking. Any questions or concerns? Yes, sir.
Just a couple of comments. I did walk the property some time ago with Mike and Steve and several others, and I think we're doing the right thing by acquiring it too, especially with the history there with the wall. And looking at both buildings, as Mike said, the one I think is fairly usable as is, the other is not and needs some rehab to preserve it, I think. But I think if we were not to do this, I don't know who would, and I think the thing would just sit and deteriorate. In addition to the wall, I think the same thing. It seems to be in good shape now, but it can't sit open like that forever and be expected to stand. So I do support this, and especially for the opportunity to park overflow parking there.
Steve?
Mike, would you share, please, with the public where the monies for this is coming from?
Sure. The county, when the I-94 project was declared, they approached us, the state approached the county to purchase the property up adjacent to the bridge. On Blackstone, the old dog pound, animal shelter, there's a couple buildings there, 3 buildings and some land. And the deal went much like this. The state agreed to build us 2 new buildings, and we built those out on Channer Road, as well as they paid us, I think it was $226,000, so well within the monies available. We have the monies available from that purchase, and we had set those monies aside for property purchase in the event we needed some. Other questions, concerns? Otherwise, a motion would be in order.
We have a motion and support. Any further questions? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, could you post the vote?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm a yes.
Okay.
Passed unanimously. Resolution for Police Week. Vice Chairman Elwell.
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a resolution, and do I have support? We have to wait for electronics to catch up? Okay,
I have to call it unless it's...
I know.
Okay.
It's a resolution.
Okay.
Elwell and Duckham.
Commissioner Bear? Yes. Commissioner Kennedy?
Yes.
Commissioner Duckham?
Yes.
Commissioner Tompkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Mahoney?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Commissioner Elwell?
Yes.
Chairman Shotwell?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Parks and Recreation, Keeley Park Site Electrical Improvements Contractor Recommendation. Mr. Hovater. Look forward to this one.
This is fairly straightforward. We, as you recall, in the site improvements original bid, we had, as an alternate, all of the electrical work, the security, lighting in the parking lot, as well as electrical to support the operation of the vendors during Fair Week. That price was unacceptable, so we went back and redesigned, and we put out proposals. We received 4 proposals, as you can see from the staff report, and the low proposal was from Hearst Electric here in Jackson. You approved an allowance in the Hoffman contract of $250,000 to do this work. So we're doing a change order to pull that $250,000 out of Hoffman's contract, so we're lowering their contract by $250,000. We've also done some value engineering with Hoffman and lowered in other areas their contract by $52,000. So this is a change order, lowering their contract by $302,000, and then turning around and awarding a contract to do the electrical for the parking lot security lighting and vendor electric for the fair, an amount of $240,000. There is a savings.
Commissioners, questions?
Support.
We have a motion and support on picking a local contractor, Hearst Electric, and saving an additional sum of money on the project. Yes. Electronically, it's coming. Tony's a yes. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? There, you can fill in that.
Thank you.
Other items? Commissioners? We've arrived at the second public comment. Do I need you to read your rules to you, Peter? Thank you.
Peter Bournemouth. I wanted to speak just a little bit about what else brownfield redevelopment authorities can do. They can deal with any property owned by a land bank. They can deal with residential properties. They do not have to cluster them, although they often are, in order to make a project that has a monetary value that it's useful. But they don't have to. There are some very innovative things that have been done with residential properties, for instance, with asbestos problems, with lead paint, with things like that in other communities. Our land bank is doing nothing. I just want to point that out to everyone. We are not utilizing the possibility to help, individual property owners using this Brownfield Development Authority, and we could. There are other programs already in existence. I'm not asking you to invent a new wheel. Thank you.
Any further public comment? Any further public comment? Public comment's now closed. Commissioner comments? No commissioner comments? We are adjourned.